Welcome to The Debate. I am super excited to get into our discussion today here on NFL Nexus. And hey, before we dive into the trenches, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment on what you thought.
Absolutely. Yeah. And become a channel member and get exclusive content and perks. Just click the join button below to support what we do here.
Right, we really appreciate it. So let us get right into the topic. For a century, building a football franchise was a lot like building a skyscraper.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, right? You poured a massive, immovable concrete foundation, and you relied on its sheer, undeniable mass to hold everything up. You won with bruising running backs who punished linebackers and, clutch kickers who delivered guaranteed points.
But modern NFL architects, they just don't want rigid concrete anymore.
No, they don't. If you look at modern seismic engineering, they build structures to sway. They use flexible, hybrid materials that adapt to the wind and absorb shock waves.
Right, it is all about movement now.
Exactly. So the question we are exploring today is whether this modern obsession with schematic versatility, that swaying, flexible architecture, is causing us to unfairly undervalue traditional, specialized dominance. I mean, has the NFL forgotten how to actually win a fistfight?
That shift in philosophy is exactly what we are seeing across the league right now. And we are grounding this discussion in some fascinating recent evaluations of the Indianapolis Colts roster.
Right, looking at where things stand today in 2025.
Exactly. We are going to look at how their current offensive weapons are being valued by the league right now and contrast that with a legendary franchise specialist, a guy who represents the absolute historical extreme of your foundational concrete philosophy.
The ultimate tension, really. Pure power versus hybrid fluidity.
Yep, and I know exactly where you stand on this.
You sure do. I am taking the position that specialized dominance remains the ultimate foundational offensive equalizer. My core argument is that modern metrics and league evaluations are, they are unfairly penalizing these traditional bludgeoning roles.
Just because they don't fit the trendy new mold, right?
Exactly. Simply because they don't fit the trendy new schematic mold of playing in space. I think the league has developed a massive, glaring blind spot for players who physically break the will of an opponent.
Well, and I am taking the position that the modern NFL correctly prioritizes dual-threat versatility and hybrid fluidity. Operating in space, manipulating the geometry of the defense, and creating mismatches is just, it is mathematically more efficient.
Mathematically, sure, but football isn't played on a spreadsheet.
True, but those numbers matter. It makes pure, one-dimensional specialists less inherently valuable when we talk about maximizing the absolute ceiling of an offense.
Okay, well, let us look at the clearest piece of evidence for this blind spot I am talking about, the recent league evaluations of Jonathan Taylor.
Oh, here we go.
We are talking about a player who just led the entire NFL with 20 all-purpose touchdowns. He rushed for 1,585 yards on 323 attempts. Through 2025, he has amassed 7,598 rushing yards and 69 touchdowns.
The numbers are undeniably great, yeah.
But here is the critical context that those spreadsheets ignore. Back in Week 11, when Daniel Jones suffered those devastating season-ending injuries.
Yeah, the fibula and Achilles injuries. Just brutal.
Just an awful situation. The Colts' offense went into a spiral, and it was Taylor who had to shoulder an immense burden. He carried that team when every single defense they faced just stacked the box because they knew exactly what was coming.
They absolutely did. No secret there.
Right. And despite all of this, league executives, coaches, and scouts ranked Taylor as only the 5th best running back in the league. This rank is an unfair slight. It drastically over-indexes on receiving statistics and completely ignores the intrinsic, game-altering value of a Derrick Henry-style back who physically breaks down a defense over 4 quarters.
See, I come at it from a completely different way when looking at those rankings. Placing Taylor 5th is not a slight at all.
Really? Not a slight?
No, it is a highly accurate reflection of modern offensive utility. When you look at the 4 backs ranked ahead of him, Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, Jamar Gibbs, and Bijan Robinson, you are looking at elite dual threats. The numbers tell the story of where the game is going.
Receiving numbers, you mean?
Exactly. McCaffrey had 102 catches for 924 receiving yards. Bijan Robinson had 79 catches for 820 yards, and Jamar Gibbs pulled in 77 for 616 yards. In the modern game, the ability to operate in space as a receiver is mathematically more efficient than running between the tackles.
But efficiency doesn't always win January football games.
Maybe, but if you are listening to this and wondering why a pass is valued so much more than a run by front offices, it just comes down to expected points added, or EPA. A target in the passing game inherently yields a higher expected point value because it bypasses the densest part of the defense. A back's absolute ceiling today is dictated by their versatility, not just their ability to handle sheer volume.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. Relying entirely on a pure receiving back is like building a sports car with no suspension.
Okay, a sports car, I am listening.
It is incredibly fast on a smooth track in September, right? But when you hit the mud and bad weather in January, you need four-wheel drive. You need the traction of a back who can grind out tough yardage.
Sure, weather plays a factor, but
Let me finish this thought. Yes, Christian McCaffrey splitting out wide creates a geometric advantage in the passing game. But what happens in the fourth quarter of a playoff game when the passing lanes tighten and the game becomes gritty? Taylor had 369 total touches.
that is a massive workload.
It is. And that sheer volume creates a physical toll on the defensive front seven that a receiving back simply cannot replicate.
But the physical toll you're talking about assumes you actually have to run through a defender to beat them. Modern offenses have realized it's mathematically cheaper to just run around them.
Cheaper, but is it better?
Well, it is worth noting Taylor actually had a career-best receiving year, too. He had 46 catches for 378 yards, but he simply doesn't stretch the field horizontally the way McCaffrey or Gibbs does.
He doesn't need to.
But he does. There is a great quote from an NFL coordinator in our source material that sums this up perfectly. He said the absolute elite tier of backs must be, quote, uniquely talented in space at the second and third levels. It is about horizontal rules.
Horizontal rules. Explain what you mean for the audience.
Right, so if Jahmyr Gibbs motions out of the backfield and lines up as a wide receiver, the defense has to declare its intentions. A middle linebacker has to walk out to the boundary to cover him. That immediately empties the middle of the field, creating a massive void for tight end to run a slant.
Okay, I track with the geometry there.
Taylor is incredibly productive, but he doesn't force the defense to break its structural rules the way those top four guys do.
But that is exactly my point about the sports car versus the four-wheel drive. You were talking about making the linebacker move out of the box. I am talking about making the linebacker regret being on the field.
Regret being on the field?
Yes, you hit a linebacker with a sledgehammer 25 times a game. By the fourth quarter, you have fundamentally altered his mechanics. His reaction time is a fraction of a second slower. His tackling angles get sloppy because his shoulders are just exhausted. That is how a game is won in the trenches.
I mean, that sounds very old school.
It is old school because it works. You mentioned EPA on a passing target versus a run, but that mathematical model is entirely isolated to single plays. It breaks down because it fails to account for the cumulative physical exhaustion of the defense over 60 minutes.
Well, I don't know if I agree it completely breaks down.
It does. When a team loses its quarterback, as the Colts did, versatility goes out the window then. The defense doesn't care if you motion your running back to the slot. They are bringing pressure regardless. Taylor's baseline of reliability in that scenario is an equalizer that hybrid fluidity just cannot replace.
That physical exhaustion is real, I won't deny that, but it is a game of diminishing returns. Why spend 4 quarters spending your own offensive energy to wear down a defense when you can bypass their physicality entirely?
Because you can't always bypass it.
And that brings us to the next logical step in this evolution: how teams are constructing their wide receiver rooms. We see this shift from individual dominance to schematic engineering playing out right now in Indianapolis.
Oh, you are talking about Josh Downs.
Exactly. Following the trade of Michael Pittman Jr. to the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Colts are leaning heavily into this exact space-oriented philosophy with Downs.
That is an interesting point, though. I would frame it very differently. Because if this modern obsession with space and hybrid roles is so vastly superior, why do players like Josh Downs require so much schematic manufacturing to succeed?
Manufacturing? I wouldn't call it manufacturing.
Let us look at the actual mechanics of his production. Since entering the league in 2023, out of 121 high-volume wide receivers, Downs ranked 111th in air yards per target.
Wow, 111th?
Yes, for those listening, air yards per target measures how far down the field the ball travels in the air before the receiver catches it. Being 111th means the offense isn't asking him to run deep, physically dominant routes where he beats a cornerback one-on-one.
They are using him underneath.
Right. They are throwing to him right at the line of scrimmage and asking him to do the work. He relies heavily on head coach Shane Steichen manufacturing free releases for him off the line. My question is this: are modern offenses simply using this quote-unquote scheme to mask a lack of true, dominant, specialized talent?
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. Shane Steichen manufacturing releases isn't about masking a flaw, it is about optimizing modern fluidity.
Optimizing fluidity by hiding his inability to beat press coverage?
No, the evaluation we have on Downs isn't that he's a limited player, it is that he shares the route-running fluidity of a Jackson Smith-Njigba. He's shorter and lighter, sure, but that fluidity is exactly what allows him to exploit the space that modern defenses are forced to concede.
Because they are playing so deep.
Exactly. Defenses today are playing shell coverages, dropping 7 or 8 men deep to prevent explosive plays. You can't just bludgeon your way through a brick wall of defensive backs anymore. You have to navigate underneath it.
And you think Downs does that naturally?
The stats prove it. Downs' 2025 production, 58 grabs, 566 yards, and 4 touchdowns, isn't a mirage created by the scheme. It is the result of a hybrid role that perfectly marries his skill set with the geometric realities of today's defenses. To say Steichen is masking a lack of talent completely misunderstands what offensive play calling is today.
But when you have to put a receiver in motion, stack him behind a tight end, and scheme a rub route just to get him a clean release off the line of scrimmage, aren't you proving that he lacks the foundational dominance of a traditional X-receiver?
Not lacking, just different.
A dominant, specialized X-receiver lines up on the boundary, looks at the cornerback and says, I am going to run a fade. You know I am running a fade, and I am going to beat you anyway. Just like Jonathan Taylor says, I am running between the guards, and you can't stop me.
But that predictability is dangerous.
When your entire offensive philosophy relies on everything having to be perfectly schemed, you introduce a massive fragility to your offense. If a defense decides to play aggressive press man coverage and blows up the timing of your pre-snap motion, your entire concept breaks. The modern offense is a house of cards.
It is not a house of cards, it is a necessary adaptation. The era of lining up and saying beat the man in front of you is dying because defensive athletes are simply too good now.
Defensive athletes have always been good.
Not like this. Defensive ends run like linebackers, and linebackers run like safeties. You need that Jackson Smith-Njigba style of route running. You need that hybrid slot usage, because if you stubbornly try to just overpower an NFL defense in 2025, they will swallow you whole.
I disagree that they will swallow you whole.
It is a feature, not a bug, to use motion and alignment to get a fluid athlete into a mismatch. Why demand your receiver win a brutal physical wrestling match at the line of scrimmage when a simple pre-snap motion guarantees him 2 yards of separation before the ball is even snapped?
Because eventually, the field shrinks. Eventually, it is 3rd and goal, or it is the playoffs, and the defense takes away your clever little pre-snap motions. And that requires pure execution.
Execution comes in many forms, though.
Let us take this concept of specialized value to its absolute historical extreme. The ultimate test of pure specialization versus versatility. I am talking about the legacy of the kicker, and specifically Adam Vinatieri.
Oh man, that is certainly taking the concept of the pure specialist to its absolute limit.
The Colts are adding Vinatieri as a 21st honoree to their Ring of Honor on October 18th against the Tennessee Titans. He is already in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. We are talking about a player whose entire existence on a football field was rooted in absolute, unversatile specialization.
He literally just kicked the ball.
Exactly. He didn't run routes, he didn't block, he didn't manipulate space or force a linebacker to the boundary. All he did was execute one highly specialized, isolated task. And what did it yield?
A lot of points.
NFL records for points with 2,673. NFL records for field goals made with 599 out of 715 attempts. He had 21 seasons with 100 or more points. He hit 44 consecutive field goals.
Those numbers are insane.
And most importantly, this pure specialist won 4 Super Bowls, including that iconic 40-yard game winner in Super Bowl XXX6. You can talk about expected points and hybrid roles and manufacturing space all day, but Vinatieri proves that ultimate foundational championship success still relies on highly specialized, reliable execution when the game is on the line.
That's a compelling argument, but have you considered that Vinatieri is essentially a ghost of an entirely different era of football?
A ghost? He just retired a few years ago.
Let me be completely clear on this. Vinatieri is the greatest of all time. He absolutely deserves the Hall of Fame, the Ring of Honor, and every accolade for what he did over 14 seasons in Indianapolis and 10 in New England before retiring in May 2021. But your argument assumes that a franchise can still be built to rely on that kind of specialization today.
Why wouldn't they?
I would argue that building an offense with the intention of relying on a specialist to bail you out is a mathematically flawed strategy in the modern NFL.
I am not convinced by that line of reasoning because points are points. In the playoffs, margins are razor thin. How is securing guaranteed points through an elite specialist mathematically flawed?
Because the mechanics of the sport have fundamentally changed between 1996 and today. When Vinatieri was hitting game winners in the early 2000s, defensive rules allowed games to be brutally low scoring.
True. Defenses were allowed to play rougher.
Exactly. Defensive backs could maul receivers down the field. Quarterbacks could be hit high and low. In that environment, a 48-yard field goal was a massive percentage of the total points in a game. Punting to play field position and relying on your kicker was the optimal mathematically sound strategy.
It won championships.
Yes, then. Today, rule changes protecting the quarterback and receivers have artificially inflated scoring. Offenses are entirely too explosive. If you build your team with the foundational philosophy that a pure specialist kicker is going to be your great equalizer, you are inherently accepting that your offense is going to stall out at the 30-yard line.
I wouldn't say accepting it, just preparing for it.
Modern offensive architects are building versatile, high-efficiency machines that are designed to score touchdowns, to go for it on fourth down, to manipulate space so thoroughly that they do not need a 48-yard field goal at the buzzer. Vinatieri was the ultimate weapon for a specific era, but treating his specialization as a blueprint for modern team building is a mistake.
But that is exactly the hubris of modern schematic engineering. You build these beautiful, highly strung machines designed to score touchdowns on every single drive.
Because that is how you win now.
You use your Jackson Smith-Nigba hybrid roles. You utilize your Christian McCaffrey dual-threat running backs. You rely on Shane Steichen's pre-snap motions. But what happens in a blizzard in January? What happens against an elite defense that plays press man, blows up your motion, and completely takes away your space?
You adapt.
No, that beautiful machine breaks down. It always does. And when it breaks down, the team that has the bludgeoning running back to grind out 3 yards in the snow and the pure specialist kicker to put 3 guaranteed points on the board through a crosswind is the team that advances.
I think you're romanticizing the grit a bit too much.
You call it a bailout to kick a field goal. I call it the concrete foundation of winning football. You are sacrificing reliability for the illusion of a higher ceiling.
And I call that pure nostalgia. You're remembering the iconic moments when the bludgeon worked, but you were ignoring the hundreds of drives where the failure to adapt, the lack of versatility, resulted in a punt instead of a touchdown.
A punt isn't a failure if you play field position.
Think about the mechanical reality of what we discussed with Jonathan Taylor. If a defense knows you are a sledgehammer, they bring a 250-pound run defender into the box. If they know your wide receiver ranks 111th in air yards, they press the line of scrimmage and condense the field. Versatility isn't just about making the offense look pretty. It is about making the offense unpredictable.
Unpredictable doesn't mean unstoppable.
When Jahmyr Gibbs lines up in the backfield, the defense genuinely does not know if he is taking a handoff between the tackles or running a complex option route against the linebacker. That moment of hesitation, that split second where the defense has to guess, is what creates the opening. You cannot create that hesitation with pure, predictable specialization.
Which brings us right back to the core of this debate. I understand the value of unpredictability, But unpredictability only matters if you can actually execute when the defense guesses correctly and meets you in the hole.
Right, and they often guess wrong because of the scheme.
As we look at the evaluations from our source material, I keep coming back to the tangible evidence. The league is undoubtedly enamored with scheme, with manufactured releases, and with dual threats. But I maintain that the true foundation of winning football remains elite, consistent specialists.
Even if it limits the overall ceiling.
Yes, because whether that is Jonathan Taylor demonstrating his irreplaceable value by carrying an offense through the sheer physical dominance of 320-plus carries, or Adam Vinatieri proving that absolute reliability in a single skill guarantees points when the margins are tightest, you need that anchor. You can build all the flexible, swaying architecture you want, but without that concrete foundation, it collapses under pressure.
And my conclusion is that the game has simply evolved past the need for that rigid concrete. While historical specialists like Vinatieri thoroughly deserve their accolades and their place in the Ring of Honor, they represent a version of football that no longer exists.
A version that won a lot of rings, though.
Sure, but maximizing offensive potential today strictly requires hybrid players who can manipulate space and keep defenses guessing. The fifth-place ranking of Jonathan Taylor isn't a lack of respect for his power. It is a mathematical acknowledgement that the ceiling of an offense is raised higher by the receiving capabilities of a McCaffrey or a Robinson.
Even with the toll it takes on the defense?
Even with the toll, it is about optimizing fluidity, just as the Colts are attempting to do with Josh Downs. The modern game demands that every player on the field be capable of stressing the defense in multiple dimensions. If you are one-dimensional today, you are a liability.
It is a profound philosophical divide. And I think we can both acknowledge that this tension between pure power and specialization on one side and modern versatility on the other is exactly what makes roster construction so fascinating right now. Every general manager in the league has to navigate this spectrum and decide what kind of team they want to build.
It really is the ultimate front office dilemma. Studying these dynamics, looking closely at how teams mechanically evaluate a bruiser versus a dual threat, or how they balance scheme versus pure isolation talent, provides such a deeper understanding of the sport.
Absolutely.
The general manager who correctly predicts whether power or space will define the next decade is the one who is going to be lifting the Lombardi Trophy. There is definitely much more to explore regarding how front offices assign value to these different skill sets in real time.
Well, we aren't going to declare a definitive winner today, and we'll leave it to the listener to decide which philosophy truly drives sustainable success in the modern game. Do you pour the concrete deep and trust the bludgeon, or do you build it to sway and trust the space?